Hello, good evening, everyone. Welcome back to another great episode of Leadership Lessons from the Mahabharata. We are officially live. Now, last week, Girish sir really shook things up when he broke down Arjun. But today, we are looking at the other side of that coin. We are talking about Bhim. You know the guy who didn't need to look at a reflection in the bowl of oil to hit his mark? He was the one who looked the demon straight in the eye and grabbed it by the neck and just finished things off. Joining me again today is Commander Girish Konkar, sir. Sir, welcome.
Thank you, and thank you very much for having this episode.
Amazing, sir. So, how do you want to start off this episode about Bhim and his leadership?
Uh, Beam is, uh, there's something about Beam that most people get, I would say, completely wrong.
Hmm.
They just call him the muscle, the brawn. They reduce him to this guy who ate a lot and hit things hard. But if you actually sit down and read the Bori critical edition, you see something totally different. Bhim is actually the most operational leader in the entire Mahabharata. So he isn't just the strength of the Pandavas, he is their survival system. Think of it this way: without Arjun, the Pandavas, yes, they would lose their finest weapon. But without Bhim, they don't even make it to the war in the first place. And today, we are going to decode exactly why that is through five defining operational moments.
So, sir, I want to go back right to the beginning because we've decided on five operational moments. Way before the exile, before the Great War, before any of that, there is this young beam in the Bori text where he's shown to be poisoned and literally dumped into the river. To anyone watching and anyone who's heard this story since childhood, it looks like a total tragedy. But the outcome is extraordinary, sir. From a leadership perspective, what is the lesson here?
Great question. So let's try and reconstruct the scene. So let's do it with the precision that it deserves from such a massive text like the Bori Mahabharata, the unabridged version of it. And that gives us some really great heavy detail that the TV shows simply just ignore. Now picture this: the Pandavas and the Kauravas are technically just teenagers. They're training together at Hastinapur. Even then, Bhim's dominance is impossible to ignore. He's faster, he's stronger, and he's more instinctively fearless than anyone else in that palace. And Duryodhan, who was, yeah, brilliant also and proud, yet deeply, deeply insecure. He just couldn't handle it. So he made a plan. And it happens that during what looks like a casual family outing by the Ganga, Duryodhan laces Bhim's food. And the Bori text specifically mentioned it. It was sweet kheer. There's a Sanskrit word for it, which technically translate to kheer. And he races it with a slow acting and lethal poison called kalakutta. And then he just waits. Bhima, as is his wont, eats heartily like he always did and falls into a deep sleep, unconscious sleep. Under the cover of darkness, Duryodhan has Bhima's body wrapped around, bound with vines, and throws him into the river. Now, for any ordinary person, you drown. But the story doesn't end here. Bhim sinks into what is called as the term used is Nagalok, the underwater serpent kingdom. And the serpents there sense an intruder and they bite him repeatedly. And this is the moment the Bori text wants us to really sit with. That is the venom from those serpents, chemically counteracted with the Kalakutta poison. And now, in modern days, it has been very scientifically proven how the thing works. And every single bite wasn't an attack, it was an antidote. As a result, Beam didn't just wake up alive, he woke up with the strength of 8,000 elephants. And it's very specifically mentioned there that he woke with 8,000 elephant strengths. He broke those vine bindings, swam to the surface, and literally walked back into camp. So Duryodhana's assassination attempt had produced the exact opposite of what he intended. My commander's analysis in this, when you look at it, is in the armed forces or the navy, we call it something called as stress hardening. That means there are certain materials and certain people who don't just absorb pressure. Under intense stress, under pressure, they actually reorganize at a molecular level and emerge with an even greater tensile strength than they started with. Something like steel. In the Navy, we would deliberately put our submarines, not just the boat, but even the crew, through various in depth pressure tests, not just technical. You would no, we have various steps of up to five. We go called as you're using a used term here called step one, step two, step three. There's a technical word for it. Okay. I don't want to take that out. But yeah, to take them to up to a level where you're now testing the entire submarine for because they've been it takes 3 months to reach that level, maybe 6 months at times, to say I can withstand any pressure. And Beam just did that. So this is not done just to survive. We do it because of the process of surviving that pressure makes the hull and the man even stronger. And Beam is a human version of that principle. The poison didn't kill him because his constitution, the physical and the mental, and maybe something even deeper, was capable of converting that damage into data and then turning that data into power. There is a gentleman called Nassim Nicholas Taleb, calls this phenomena as anti-fragility. Fragile systems break when you shock them. Resilient systems manage to absorb it. But anti-fragile systems, that's the rarest of rare categories. They actually grow from the shock. And they don't just bounce back, they bounce forward. Some modern day examples we can relate to is something like think of Airbnb. This is the ultimate modern example of a company being bound and thrown into the river by a global catastrophe like the COVID and coming out with the strength of 8,000 elephants. And it's really for them, March 2020, Airbnb was preparing for one of the biggest IPOs in history. And then the pandemic, the COVID hit overnight. Overnight, global travel stopped. Their revenue didn't just dip, it cratered by 80% in 8 weeks. And they were sinking fast. They had to lay off 25% of their staff. They were bound and sinking in the river that no one knew where the bottom was. What did the company do? Many companies in that position would just somehow try to survive. But Brian Chesky, the CEO, used the poison of the pandemic to perform literally a structural upgrade. He realized that they had become too bloated, trying to do luxury travel, flights, and magazine publishing, etc. So what he did was he cut everything that wasn't the core, and he pivoted the entire platform from international tourism to local stays. He realized that people didn't want to just fly to Paris, they wanted to drive 2 hours to a cabin in the woods. The result? By the time they finally went public in December of 2020, they were not just a travel company. They were a cultural phenomena. They had the most successful IPO of the year. The venom of the pandemic forced them to return to their roots and build an even more anti fragile business model. They didn't just bounce back, they refined travel. I would say a final tactical brief we can give here for our leaders. Let's be real for a second. Every organization, whether you're a team of 5 or 5,000, is going to face its poison kheer moment. It could be a market crash like Airbnb faced, a toxic hire who poisons your culture, or a product launch that fails right in front of your competitors. The question isn't if the crisis hits, the question is, do you have the operational architecture to convert that damage into strength? I want all of you to audit your own team's anti fragility tonight with these three questions. When was your last major failure happened? Did your team pull back and become cautious, risk averse, or did they become more calibrated and take a more calculated risk? Do you actually have a postmortem culture, or is it just a blame culture? Inside the organization, is the word failure a door on the wall? Because if it's a wall, you are fragile. It's time to start building the door.
Sir, I just love this description that you've given, that a failure is either a dead end or an entrance to the next level. So this is a very
Good
important thing that we should remember. So if this concept of anti-fragility that sir has just explained, if it's resonating with you, just click the like button right now. Share this live stream. I'm not going to say friends today. Share it with your team. Honestly, there is going to be someone in your network who feels like they need this antidote, so make sure you send it across to them. Sir, moving on to the second pillar. In the Bori text, throughout the exile, Bhim is constantly in these fight or flight moments, whether it's facing Hidimba, Bakasur, or even Hanuman in disguise. The normal response for most people would be to run away, but Bhim never retreats. He always engages. Sir, how is it that is he wired like that, or is there a method to this?
It's definitely a pattern. Apurva, it's and a very smart pattern. In the military, we look at two things. One is either threat avoidance, other one is threat absorption. Now, avoiding a threat is fine. Withdrawing from a fight isn't being a coward, it's being intelligent. You don't walk into a trap just for fun, but threat absorption, now that is pro level. That's for a leader who has tested themselves so much that they actually trust themselves more than they fear the problem. People think that Beam is just being reckless or angry. But as a commander, I see a man who has done his homework. He knows exactly where his limits are. He knows his breaking point is much higher than anyone else's. And that is what I call operational courage. Beam doesn't fight because he isn't afraid. He fights because he's done the math, he's done the calculations, he's calculated that he can take the hit and still win. He knows he can absorb the damage and keep moving. Lesson for us, you can actually build this skill. It just takes two things. Be honest with yourself. Know exactly what you can and can't handle. No ego. First, practice in the low stakes. Test yourself in small, safe ways first. Because this testing of the small, safe way first is exactly where your training matters. Like when we do these leadership development programs, program which the unstoppable you or building teams that don't quit. What you do is in a secure environment, you test your teams. How much does it take for them to break? Because that way, when a huge crisis hits, you don't panic. You just act. And Beam didn't hope he could win. He knew he would because he had already survived the poison and the river. He was already calibrated for the fire.
Fighting words, sir. He was already calibrated for the fire. Sir, I want to move on to one of the stories that is an all time favorite of mine. It's almost funny, but it's also very intense. The Pandavas are hiding in a small village called Eka Chakra, and there's a demon nearby named Bakasur, who is basically like a local bully. And Bhima is the one who decides to handle him, but not in a way that you would think. He eats his lunch on the way to the fight. So, could you please break this down for us? And what is the leadership lesson here?
So, Apurva, let's look at the heart of the story. And the Bori text gives us a detail that changes everything. It's not just a strong man story, it's a study in leadership. The Pandavas are exhausted, they've been hiding for years, and one night they hear the family they are staying with crying in the next room. So Kunti goes to see what's wrong, and the family explains their nightmare that this demon Bakasur has an extortion racket going on. And every week, the village has to send a cart of food and one person to deliver it. And the person never comes back. This week, it's this family's turn. And inside that room, the father is crying, the mother is begging that she would like to go instead, and the kids are terrified. It's total despair. So Kunti, over years, understands this conversation and simply comes and asks Beam to take care of it. And being Beam, must have just said, Ji Mataji, no formal meeting, no formal discussions. He doesn't ask for permission. He just stands up and says, okay, I'll go. I'll take the food. What a lesson for us. Think about this. Beam doesn't give a big speech. He doesn't call a council of war and all that. He just sees a burden that is crushing the people who can't carry it, and he picks it up. He does it quietly. What happens next? His classic Beam. He drives the car into the forest, and this is the funny part. He starts eating the demon's food. Bakasur is a Rakshas, the demon, uska khana, starts eating it. And sits down and calls out to Bakasur like he's waiting for a friend. Obviously, Bakasur shows up absolutely furious, and that fight that follows is absolutely brutal. So they do lead to a fight, and Beam uses his bare hands, lifts the demon up, breaks his spine, and that's it. He goes back, leaves the dead body of Bakasur at the village gate, comes back, tells the family demon is dead, the village is free, and this is the most important part. He never mentions afterwards. Silence. He doesn't look for praise. He just goes back to his life. Normal persons, what would we have done? We would have taken the drum and beaten it. I would beaten Bakasur. I'm the greatest warrior of all. Silence.
Sir, this Bakasur story is so relatable. It's basically about someone taking on a really big problem so that others don't have to deal with it. Now, in our daily lives, how do we see this in our jobs and in the work that we do?
Think of it like, let's say, being an umbrella. When it rains, the person holding the umbrella gets their arm tired and maybe their shoulder gets wet. But the person standing under the umbrella, they stay dry. They can keep walking and focusing on the road because you are blocking the storm for them. In an office, a bakasur isn't a rakshas or a demon. It's maybe it could be a cranky client, a scary deadline, or a technical glitch that is stressing everyone out. A real leader doesn't go underground saying, "Look how much I'm doing for you." They don't do it for a thank you. They do it simply because they have the thick skin to handle the pressure. They fight the battle quietly so that their team can just focus on their work. They do not just keep passing down the pressure. These leaders are the bulwarks who will handle the pressure which comes from the top, from the environment, and they will protect their teams from that pressures which come. So, real leadership is picking up the heavy bags that others are not strong enough to carry yet.
Sir, I love this analogy that you've given about being the umbrella, protecting the team so that they can actually continue doing their best work without getting soaked by the stress. So, to all our viewers, if you've ever had a boss who was an umbrella for you, just hit that like button. Let's give them a shout out in the comments. Please tag them so that they also come and start watching our live now. Sir, now I have a question. That's a part of our third pillar. And before I move on to that, do you want to talk a little bit about Starbucks, maybe back in 2008 or something like that? I think you have a story about it.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, Apurva, we go back to 2008. That's 12 years before, not more than that. But back then, the company that is Starbucks was actually failing. The coffee didn't taste as good anymore. The stores were messy, and the staff was stressed out because quarterly targets were not getting met. Every store was bleeding. And the monster here was a dying brand. The baristas in the stores were the ones suffering every day. Now, what did the leader do? The founder, Howard Schultz, he came back as the boss. He didn't just tell the staff saying, "Oh no, you must work harder, or काम करो, जोर से काम करो, you must work more." He did something very brave. One Tuesday afternoon, that is on 26th of February 2008, Schultz literally closed down 7,100 US stores for 3.5 hours to retrain the 135,000 baristas in the art of creating the perfect espresso. It's, it is estimated that the closure cost the company roughly $6 million in revenue that day and invited significant amount of criticism from Wall Street. And he took the financial loss for that day. He absorbed all the mean comments, the nasty comments, the trolls from the news and the stock markets. In those days, mobiles and WhatsApp were not so much, so trolling probably was more from the news and from the newspapers and the TV channels. But he used that time to retrain every single worker on how to make great coffee again. He stepped in front of the monster of bad quality and said, "I will take the hit today so my team can be proud of their work tomorrow." The result? He saved the company. He protected his people from a broken system. The village was safe and the coffee was good again. As a leader, you have to be the shield in front of your team. If your team is fighting monsters like bad tools or confusing rules, that is the leader's job to fix it. When you get a scary email from your boss, don't just forward it and scare your team. Stay calm, breathe deep, a few deep breaths, and now break it down and give them a clear plan. Real leadership is making sure your team feels safe. They need to know that if a big mistake happens, you will stand in front of them and take the heat. If they are nervous every time they see a meeting invite from you, you haven't built your shield yet. It's time to start building it. And here, I'd like to give you one more story about Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam. Dr. Abdul Kalam was, I think, he was the project director for the Rohini satellites way back, I think, in 70s somewhere. And India was just about yet to launch a satellite. But it's a long story, so I think we leave that story for another day. My idea was, if you go to that story, it was there on YouTube. When the rocket failed, the person who stood in front and took the flag from everybody who was saying the rocket is failed was the scientific advisor to the government of India. Next year, this rocket was launched. Again, Abdul Kalam was the project director. It was a flawless launch. He put Abdul Kalam in front to say, now you take all the laurels. Everybody said, wow, well done, great job done. So here's the biggest classic example in India that we have here, where when things failed, ultimate leader stood in front of the press and took all the brickbats. And when it was time to celebrate a success, he put the project director, Abdul Kalam, in front.
Always wonderful to hear more APJ Abdul Kalam stories from you. I know he's a hero for you as much as he is for all of us. So, you know what I'd like to ask you now is another powerful story from Beam's life. And it's a little bit something that seems very poetic that we're talking about today because it also has Lord Hanuman in it, and today is Hanuman Jayanti. So, sir, once in the forest, Bhim, the strongest man on the planet, was completely stuck, and he's defeated not just by a great warrior or anything, but by a monkey's tail. So, could you please set the scene for us?
Yeah. So this is absolute wonderful story. All of us have, as kids, would have l- read it. It's a classic. In the Bori text, it really captures the drama here. Now imagine this: the Pandavas are in the forest, and there's a divine scent drifts by on the wind of the Saugandhika lotus. So Saugandhika means 100 flowers. Lotus is there, and Draupadi smells it and asks Bhim to find it for her. Now Bhim is at his absolute peak of his power. He's defeated demons, survived exile, and knows that he's the strongest living human. So he hikes into the Himalayas with total confidence. He feels untouchable. Then he sees an old monkey who's lying right across the narrow path. The monkey looks frail, grey, and probably half dead. And Bhima's first reaction, pure ego. And he shouts at that, hey, old creature, move. Do you know who I am? I am Bhim, the son of the wind god. I'm in a hurry. The monkey doesn't even open his eyes properly. He just whispers, I'm too old and tired to move, son. But you are young and strong. Why don't you just lift my tail out of the way and keep going? Beam almost laughs. He reaches down with one hand to toss the tail aside. It doesn't move. He uses both hands. Nothing. He plants his feet on the ground and pulls with every single muscle in his body. The ground actually starts to shake, but that tail doesn't budge an inch. Beam stops. He's sweating. He's shocked. And suddenly his ego just evaporates. He falls to his knees and asks quietly, who are you? And the monkey stands up and starts to grow. And he turns into this massive golden glowing figure. It's Hanuman, the original son of the wind god, and the hero who jumped over an ocean and carried a mountain for Lord Ram. He says, I'm your brother, Hanuman says. I didn't stop you to embarrass you. I stopped you to give you something better than strength. Remember this: the universe is much bigger than your power. Never forget that. Now go get your flower. A very powerful leadership lesson here: your ego versus humility. In leadership, we can call this as intellectual humility. It's that moment you realize that no matter how strong you are, you don't know everything. The day a leader thinks that he or she is the best, they stop listening. And they try to muscle through every problem instead of being smart. But look at Bheem. Even he couldn't move that tail. If you ignore people because they don't look important, you are already lost. When you hit the wall, don't get angry. Be humble. Your title is just a tiny speck in this massive world. Beam walked away with the flower, but he also walked away with a quiet heart. He learned that real leadership isn't about being the biggest person in the room, it's about knowing your place in the universe.
So I think this one bit that we are talking about. It just makes you understand that the universe is so much bigger than you and your power. So this is a reminder each and every one of us needs from time to time, I feel. And to our viewers, if you've also seen a tale like this that has stopped you in your tracks and taught you a very important lesson, let us know in the comments below. We'll be happy to read out some of your lessons as well. So moving on to the fourth pillar. Before we go there, can we also talk about some examples that are very similar to this story that we've read right now? And maybe we could talk about Titan.
Yeah, so you mentioned Titan. Titan, we of course we all know as a jewelry company. Tanishq is also a big brand itself. But Titan watches, before they became such a massive hit, so the late time is somewhere in the late 90s. And back then, they were the beam of watches: strong, famous, and yes, successful. But then, somewhere along the way, they hit a wall. Somehow, when they studied their demographics as to who are the who are purchasing the watches, they realized that the youngsters, the teenagers, are not getting these watches. They're not buying them because to young people, apparently, Titan was looking like a more like a papa's brand. It was too formal and serious. Whereas this young generation, which is coming up, and India's per capita income was growing, that they could afford watches for these young people, it was being unmet. What did they do? Now, the senior bosses definitely tried to muscle through it, and they made smaller versions of their old gold watches, gold plated watches, didn't work. And they were pulling at the tail with both the hands, but somehow it was moving. And then they had their Hanuman moment. And the biggest bosses at Titan did something very humble. They stopped giving advice and started listening to their youngest employees. These junior designers told them, stop making jewelry, make fashion. Use plastic, that is a new thing today. You can use bright colors, make it look cool. And senior managers were smart enough to admit that they didn't understand completely the new generation. And they let the junior team take the lead. And this is how Fast Track was born. It became a huge hit because the leaders knew when to step back and let the experts speak, even if these experts were 22 years old. I would say as a tactical brief for all of you listening in, check your ego. In leadership, you have to be careful that your ego isn't blocking your path. There are three simple signs that you might be stuck. First, do you talk the most? If you are the only one speaking in meetings, you are not leading. You are just lecturing. Second, do you say no too fast? If your first reaction to a new idea is, we already tried that, you stop growing. Third, you hate being corrected. If you get angry when someone points out your mistake or a mistake, you hit a wall. Hanuman left Bhima with one big thought. What tail can you not lift right now? In other words, what is the one thing you're too proud to admit that you're struggling with? That is exactly where you need to grow.
So true, sir. I think all of us need to sit with this thought for a moment. And also, we have to talk about the hardest scene in the entire Mahabharata, the dice game. Most people, when they think of it, they talk about Duryodhan, they talk about Yudhishthir, but they talk about the failure of the brothers or the courage of Draupadi when she called out to Lord Krishna. But Bhim is also there in that room, and it's his role is something else. Can you walk us through it?
So we have to look at this clearly again, removing from the cinematic fluff. The Bori text shows us a moment where leadership completely failed. It's a massive crisis. The Pandavas are in the palace playing a game of dice. It is a trap, and Yudhishthir loses everything: his kingdom, his brothers, and family, Draupadi. Definitely, what happens next is terrible. Draupadi is brought into the room. The room is full of powerful kings and teachers. There are men who could have stopped with just one word, but they stay silent. I want every leader to think about this. Staying silent isn't being fair. Staying silent is helping the bully. These men chose to follow the rules instead of doing what was right. There's a difference between doing the things right and doing the right thing. They were not doing the right thing. And they chose their own safety over a person in pain. Bhim was not like that. He is the only one who speaks up. And he rose so loud that the room shakes. And he makes a promise in front of everyone. He says he will personally defeat the men who did this. And he isn't just shouting because he's angry, he's turning his internal pain into a mission. The real lesson: Beam keeps that promise for 13 years. Through long years of hiding and hunger, he never forgets. Even on the last day of the war, he does exactly what he would do. He didn't just vent his feelings, he followed through until the job was done. I would say, as leadership brief, two words: speak up. In any job or team, you will see moments where someone is being treated unfairly. Sometimes people even use the rules as an excuse to stay quiet. A beam leader knows two things. First, Silence is a choice. If you see something wrong and say nothing, you're actually helping the problem. You aren't being neutral, you are being part of it. Second, a promise is a contract. If you say you will fix a problem, you stay with it until it is done, even if it takes years of hard work. And real leadership isn't about giving speeches when things are easy. It is about speaking up when the room is silent and everyone else is afraid.
I think very rarely we actually put this into perspective that your silence is helping the bully. We've all been in rooms where we should have probably spoken up. And it's a very important message. It's very powerful. And if it resonates with you, please let us know in the comments. And, it helps us do better and bring more such stories to you. Sir, before we move on to the final pillar, I wanted to know if there's a story here that we could all listen to.
Yeah, so the story is about Karsanbhai Patel and Nirma. Let's look at Nirma. In 1969, Karsanbhai Patel was a lab assistant. At that time, laundry detergent was a luxury, and big brands sold it for 13 rupees a kilo, which for an average Indian family was very expensive. And Karsanbhai had taken a vow and a mission to make a high quality product that every Indian could afford. And he started making detergent in his backyard and selling it for just 3 rupees a kilo. He would cycle 15 kilometers every day to sell his handmade powder door to door. For 3 years, he didn't make a profit. He didn't have a big office or a marketing team. He just had himself, his bicycle, and his promise. The result? He didn't just survive, he changed the entire dynamics of the market. He forced the big companies to lower their prices. He proved that an honest Indian brand could win by focusing on the common man. He kept his why alive on a bicycle for years before it became a household name. He built a mission that didn't need a boardroom's permission. So, as a leadership brief, I would say speak up. Let's look at another way. Think of your mission as an internal GPS. Most people only follow it when the road is clear. A beam leader keeps driving even when the signal is lost and everyone else in the car is telling them to turn back. And the hardest moment for a leader isn't failing, it's standing in the room where everyone is silent because they're afraid to support you. You don't need the room to agree with you if you already believe in yourself. Believe in yourself first.
Absolutely, sir. I think it's time we become our own biggest believers rather than seek that validation externally. And today we've covered a lot: bouncing back, protecting the team, staying humble, and finding your why and serving others. But come Monday, how does a leader actually use all of this in their office?
Yeah, so we should have a simple checklist that you should remember and take it to you every day. So, Beam was all about action, not just talk. So, here is, I would say, the Beam audit. Ask yourself these 5 questions this week. First one is about bouncing back. When something went wrong recently, did you just fix it or did you learn something new? Don't just ask what happened. Ask, what does this tell us that we couldn't learn any other way? How should this not be repeated? And that will be a big learning for you. Second one on regarding protecting your team. Think about your last week, your last month. When you felt pressure from above, from the market. Did you pass on that strength straight down to your team? A leader's job is to catch the stress so the team can focus on the work. Next is on staying humble. Find that person in your office who knows more about a specific topic than you do. Maybe a junior developer or a customer service rep. Sit with them. Don't give them orders. Let them teach you. Next one is on your why. And it's a challenge to all of you. Can you write one sentence explaining why you do this work, your job, even if you weren't getting paid? If you can't write in 60 seconds, your mission isn't clear yet. And this one is the last one is about serving others. Do one small task this week that is below your job title. Answer a customer email yourself. Help move some boxes, maybe. Don't tell everyone you're doing it. Just do it and stay connected to the real work. In the final analysis, most people think Beam is just a muscle, but the body text shows us that he's the heart of the team. He's the one who makes sure that the mission survives reality through poison, pride, and failure. Arjun wins the battles, but Bhim wins the war. In your company, you need both. You need the skill of an Arjun, but you also need the grit, the protection, and the humility of a Bhim. Start this week. Pick just one of these five things which I explained to you before and go deep. Show up, do the work. You don't need the applause.
I think this is the perfect way to end today's live session, sir. This is the best picture of Beam I've ever seen. You know, it gives you a very holistic perspective on who he was as a person and as a leader as well. So, to everyone watching, this was our 10th episode. Now, next week, we're going to look at the twins, Nakul and Sahdev. We'll talk about the power of details, preparation, and the leaders who sees what everyone else misses. Hit the bell icon so that you don't miss it, and share this with a leader who works hard every single day without getting the credit they deserve. Don't tell them, just share it and they'll know why you're sending it across. Thank you and see you next Thursday.